In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst.
He is and ever shall be.
The year is 42 or 44, about 10 years after the resurrection of Christ. At the throne in Jerusalem is another Herod, the grandson of Herod the Great, the one who slaughtered the innocents. His successor before him was actually exiled, Herod's son. And he is persecuting the church. His motives are twofold. One is that Christianity is a political movement, or seen as partially a political movement, but also because he wants favor with the Jews of that time. So he is known for being externally pious, this Herod. In other words, he seems to do what the law says. Yet, behind the scenes and in history, we know that he was not, in any sense of the word, a pious Jew, or he wasn't even a Jew. In today's feast day, which talks about the venerating of the chains of Jesus. This whole story is in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 12. And if you read chapter 12, it starts out with the martyrdom of James. This is what Herod has done. He has martyred one of the James. And then he goes and he gets Peter. He arrests him, and he places him. And in the language, we're to understand that Peter is put in prison. And in that prison, he would have 2 guards standing watch, while 2 guards held the chains that he was in. And it's mentioned that there's four of these squadrons, or I forgot, quadrants, I guess it would be. 4 of these quadrants, so taking watch over the night. This is a serious prisoner. This is someone who is not meant to leave. And essentially, in the way we think, it's impossible for Peter to get out of his situation. Herod's goal is to present Peter to the Jews. And because he is guarded, it is indicated that he is a political prisoner. The offense, the punishment, possible beheading. And all of this to keep peace, to gain favor, and to elevate the stature of Herod. So the church is praying in the background. The Peter the Great, of the Peter who preached one day and 3,000 souls were saved. The same Apostle Peter who traveled over the empire, who built churches and founded communities. This same beloved apostle who people had experienced miracles through, great healings, even through his shadow. The church prays fervently for him. Peter, on the other hand, is in his cell sleeping on the day before he is to be brought before the Jews and possibly executed. He's in his cell sleeping on this last day. And at the behest of the prayers of the church, an angel comes and strikes him. It's indicated that this strike seems to be a substantial strike. I don't know about you, but this morning, I'm sorry, I'm breaking away from the story of Peter to talk about myself. I hit the wrong button for snooze, and I always sleep better during snooze than I did the whole night. And so I suddenly woke up, and I was in a mid-dream state. I think I washed myself at least twice in the shower because I had forgotten that I'd already done it. And as I'm walking through these motions, I was thinking, of course, about Peter, because he describes his experiences not knowing as to whether he was awake. Was he having a vision? Was this real? This angel strikes him. Get up. Get your clothes on quick. It sounds like Peter isn't moving very quickly. It sounds like he's half in a daze. Get up. Let's go. Come on. The angel, his chains fall away from his arms. Somehow, obviously, miraculously, the guards don't notice that they're leaving. They get to the iron gate, the very gate which would ensure that they would be, again, stuck. That's if they didn't have to make their way past the guard. Simply opens. Peter comes to himself sometime later, and retrospectively, wondering what had happened, realizes, hey, I'm out of prison. And he goes and runs and tells the story to John Mark's house. This beautiful story, this experience of a miracle. And all of this when he is in a sense, half out of it. Today, the church commemorates the chains of the Apostle Peter, and it talks about the veneration of these chains. For us, we should take a brief moment to understand veneration. You see, as Christians, it's something that we do. We venerate. And we actually, in reality, venerate everything. Not simply icons and chains or the scriptures or the things within our lives. We are meant to, within our very hearts, to carry around a sense of reverence and a sense of honor that we pay towards God with almost everything that we deal with. When we encounter human beings, we're meant to encounter them as images of Christ. And when we encounter them, we venerate them with that. We treat them with respect, with honor, with love. And actually, we're called to do this even for enemies. When we encounter objects that have been used to build up our faith, objects that have somehow revealed Christ to us, have revealed Christ to others, have somehow transformed the world in some small sense, we pay honor. We have reverence. We have a sense that this object has meaning, that it builds the faith, that it is a conduit of grace. And in truth, for the Christian, almost anything can be a conduit of grace. It is true that you can go out into the woods and find God. It is true that you can be a good carpenter and in your work find God. That you can be a good administrator and find God. It is also true, as we see in today's celebration, that we can find God even in prison. As a matter of fact, there's a story of the Father Roman Braga of blessed memory, who will eventually be probably canonized a saint, but he was a priest monk and was held in a prison during World War II. And one of the stories that filters down is that by the time he left the prison, he was venerating his bed. He was venerating his bed because his bed was where he found Christ. It was in that prison cell where his faith became serious. It was in that very spot where he made his contact, where he was forced to put away all the books and to actually pray. And so he venerated that very spot as the place where Christ was to be encountered. So it's not odd that we venerate chains, because chains are the things that were going to keep Peter from preaching. Chains were ultimately the things that were going to lead to Peter's death. Yet through those very objects, those chains, the witness of God, God's ability to save us at the last minute from death, from the enemy, and to bring us out into the open when we're not even fully awake, is revealed within those chains. So those chains were kept by the early church, and they were brought out for veneration all throughout the centuries. Miraculous healings, all sorts of stories of people as they venerated these chains being healed. There's a lesson for this in us, a spiritual lesson. You know, oftentimes we feel bound by our circumstances. We feel as though we might do more with ourselves had we been given better tools, if someone would put more into us now. Perhaps our circumstances of debt, our circumstances of sin that we struggle with repeatedly. These sort of things are the chains that we wrestle with. Now, there may come a time when we get to experience the chains of Peter in reality, to be locked away for political and religious reasons. But for now, most of us are simply chained by our own spiritual life, by our own either lack of spiritual life, our own sins, or circumstances. We're not meant to look at these circumstances merely as obstacles. We're meant to actually venerate them as well. We're meant to look at these obstacles, these things that hold us down, as the very things which can reveal the grace of God in us. As the very things that as God unbinds us, as He looses us, will bear witness to the gospel in a way that is undeniable for us. Maybe at the last minute, maybe a little earlier, like earlier in the Apostle Peter's life when he was with the Apostle Paul and was released from his bonds. And we don't know when God is going to do His work. But ultimately, we have to remember in our own spiritual life that there is no garbage. There is no waste. Do you feel blocked? Well, that block that you've been given in your prayer is for you. And it may be the place where you grow. It may be the place where you're challenged. Do you feel as though you can't step into your ministry, whatever that may be? Those obstacles are the very training grounds which will reveal the grace of God, etc., etc. Because we struggle with so many things, and we often feel bound by so many things, this is just a simple reminder. As Christians, we venerate the chains of Peter, those things which would have brought him to his death, would have brought him to his humiliation, were the things that ultimately revealed the glory of God. In our lives also, our chains, with all possibility, with all grace, with God's ability to accomplish anything, are also our weaknesses, are the very places where God's grace can be revealed and where we can be a great witness to the church. Finally, one last thing, which is an important lesson in today's feast day. The church prayed for Peter. The church fervently came together and prayed for Peter. The angel was sent because the church was praying for Peter. We are a holy family. We are the saints of the church. We need to be fervently knowing and praying for each other, seeing how we are, seeing our struggles, seeing what binds each other, and lifting each one of us up in this community in prayer. Though that prayer is ultimately part of the miracle of today's story. So may God bless us to be prayerful for one another. May He bless us to be diligent in our own spiritual lives, to bear the burdens that we've been given. But also may He make us not think of them as mere obstacles, but make them witnesses and make them things that show the grace of God as we live our life of reverence and veneration in the church. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst.
He is